A white CEO raised his champagne glass. Laughter rippled through the room, tailored suits, polished shoes, and a technical document in Chinese that not a single person there could read. He waved a $2 billion contract like it was a theater prop, then tossed it onto the table right in front of a black housekeeper in a plain gray uniform. "Translate this," he said loudly, "and I'll give you my monthly salary, 600 grand. The room burst into laughter, the kind of laugh that doesn't just mock, it erases. But the woman, she didn't laugh. She didn't blush. She just looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Okay, you'll have the translation by morning." Silence. One beat. Then the laughter returned louder this time, but with a hint of something else. Uncertainty. What are you thinking right now? That it was just a joke. Another comedy sketch where the lowest-ranking person becomes entertainment for the powerful. Or, are you starting to wonder, what if she actually does it? This isn't a fairy tale. No godmother. No magic. Just a black woman overlooked, underestimated, treated like background noise standing in a boardroom filled with powerful men. And a contract hiding a complex web of tech deception that not even the legal team saw, but she did. She didn't shout. She didn't fight back. She did what they never expected. She read. She understood. She translated. If you've ever been looked down on for your job, if you've ever been told you were too small to matter, if you've ever stayed quiet even when you were right because no one would listen, this story is for you. Hit like, share, and drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about the silent, but far from ordinary. It all began that night, when a powerful man made a joke, and a quiet woman turned it into a silent war. The crystal lights shone down on the champagne glasses like moonlight dancing on water, bright, cold, and distant. In the grand hall of the Carrington estate, the string quartet played softly by a gas fireplace, while the laughter of the powerful echoed through velvet-covered walls. Reginald Carrington, the CEO of Carrington Systems, stood at the center of the party as if he'd just rescued the U.S. economy from catastrophe. He wore a white tuxedo with black satin trim, a loosely tied bow tie like a tech king basking in his victorious glow. He had just signed a $2.8 billion partnership deal with a Chinese telecom giant and lifted his head as if he were the only one fluent in global connectivity. "Gentlemen, ladies," Reginald raised his glass, his booming voice accustomed to hearing itself. "Tonight, we don't just celebrate profit, we celebrate power. Ours." Glasses clinked. Laughter resonated against the high wooden ceiling. Silver-suited businessmen. Sparkling gowns like magazine covers, it felt like a modern Versailles. Only traded in stocks instead of swords and board seats instead of thrones. At the edge of the scene where the light didn't quite reach Amara, Belle stooped to pick up a broken glass. Her gloved hands slender and silent, a shadow of herself. She moved like water, unnoticed by everyone except one man. Reginald glanced in her direction. Something flickered in his gaze, not kindness, but the calculating look of someone choosing garnish for the evening. Suddenly, he pivoted, his shoe heels clicking sharply on marble. "Amara," he called. His tone wasn't polite, it was commanding. The party quieted. Heads turned. She lifted her head, surprised, then gracefully stepped forward, eyes vacant, fingers tightening around the towel draped over her arm. Reginald pulled a thick dossier from his leather briefcase, its cover marked with Chinese characters and partner logos. "My legal team says this contract is a mess. Not even our Mandarin experts can get through it." He smirked, tossing the papers toward Amara as if it were a social experiment. "Translate this, and I'll wire you my salary for the month. $600,000, darling." A pregnant pause. Then laughter burst like a champagne cork, uproarious, buy-sided. A female director scoffed, That's wicked. Reggie, poor thing, probably thinks mandarin is a fruit. Amara didn't bow her head, didn't shrink. She stared into his eyes, those deep, dark eyes holding unreadable calm. Okay, she replied evenly, by tomorrow morning. Silence fell, dense as midnight. The room frozen for a heartbeat. Then laughter roared back larger, louder, more forced, as if laughter could expel the discomfort she'd dropped into their midst. If any camera caught that moment, it would have stayed on Amara's face no anger, no fear, no breaking, just stillness, like the eye of a storm before thunder rolls. Okay, she said again, measured, by tomorrow morning. The room held its breath. For a moment, every clink, every note, every breath stopped. Even the sommelier behind Reginald froze, glass poised mid-pour. No one believed she had the nerve to say that, to match his eyes without bowing. Then, as though rehearsed since time began, the laughter returned louder, harsher like a crowd masking the tremor of an unseen bomb. Did she just by morning, that's rich. Reva Ellington, the senior executive, drifted closer, her satin gown and French perfume in sharp contrast. She tilted her head, half smile and half sneer. What's next? The janitor rewriting our patent filing, or maybe the security guard presenting our quarterly earnings. Laughter erupted once more, but Reginald didn't laugh. He still stared at Amara, the maid who dared challenge the illusion of control he believed he commanded. She didn't purse her lips, didn't look down, didn't pretend not to hear. She simply stood straight, hands clasped over her belly as always, gaze peeling through their wine and power veneer into the hollow heart of their toxic jokes. Reginald curled a corner of his mouth, laughter dying in his throat. His face froze for a moment like he'd swallowed something bitter. Well then, he said with a nonchalant shrug, you heard her, by morning. Amara reached out calmly, deliberately, no extra motion. Reginald placed the hefty dossier in her hands, dry humor masquerading as a prop, yet packed with the tinder of challenge. She accepted it, inclining her head not in submission, but in the composed grace of an actor acknowledging their cue. Then she turned and walked away. If cameras followed, they caught her back receding down plush crimson carpets, a path only shiny heels ever trod. But tonight, a maid's sensible black shoes left a different mark, a quiet shift no one could ignore. She didn't glance back, not once. Behind her, their laughter rolled on like an oblivious soundtrack to the scene they thought they controlled. But in her mind, Amara finally heard her own voice. They think I'm a joke, but tonight, the joke just opened a file. The kitchen door closed behind her with that subtle click enough to separate two worlds. Out there, glasses clinked, laughter carved lines of privilege. In here, only the clock's hands moved softly, measured like the breath of a house long accustomed to silence. Under warm yellow light illuminating the worn wooden table, she placed the dossier down, the stiff Chinese characters unfurled like coiled snakes poised to strike. She opened to the first page. Her eyes slid across the lines. Familiar words, then complex sections. Suddenly, she paused, fingers tight on the page, palm trembling not in fear, but in recognition of a dormant memory. She reached to a wooden cabinet and slid open the bottom drawer. It creaked like an old soul's sigh. Beneath ancient cloth, she found something. A worn, leather-bound dictionary. Frayed corners soft with age. In the first page's fading ink, Dr. Mariah Clay. She, Amara. Formerly, Mariah placed it beside the stack and poured herself a cup of tea, black, warm, sloshing with purpose. In her head played a soft symphony, a waltz of solitude born of scholarly devotion. She sat at the small table. Her old silver laptop booted slowly, fan whining in welcome. Its screen glowed, reflecting her unadorned, unbowed face, a woman whose memory had been buried alive. Fingers tapped to open a translation tool, not Google, but her own language software from the days when she was a professor at a linguistic institute before she was dismissed like a ghost, wiped clean from history. Every word in that contract became a stone in a labyrinth, and she overlooked, underestimated, erased for being too brilliant in a world who feared black excellence began tracing each path. She didn't flinch, didn't darken her brow. She annotated, researched, highlighted all the while understanding that the life they erased was only his cue for her encore. Night wind slipped through a gap in the door. The stove's flame flickered. Amara looked toward the window out at the still-lit Carrington mansion. Its lights gazed down like silent watchers staring at a past they'd built, oblivious to the future being constructed in this humble kitchen. Laughter from the party drifted in thin as wine, sour as vinegar. Amara sipped her tea, set her pen to the margin of page 1. Tomorrow, she thought, eyes sharp as a blade carving through darkness, I won't be the one they forget in the background. Amara sat at the wooden table, her tea long since cooled, eyes locked on the computer screen as if staring through the words themselves through time. The ticking clock on the peeling wall sounded like a knock from the past. She closed her eyes and the past surged in uninvited. 20 years earlier, she wasn't called Amara Belle then. She was Dr. Mariah Clay, a linguistics professor at the prestigious Rainford Institute, specializing in technical translation, especially iconographic languages in high-tech contexts. The scene shifted to a lecture hall filled with attentive students. Bright projector light illuminating her as she explained semantic structures in multilingual contracts. Her voice was clear, commanding. Her hand moved over the smartboard like a conductor leading an orchestra. A newspaper photo, Mariah shaking hands with the Japanese ambassador at an AI grammar translation conference. An awards ceremony, she stood radiant in a dark blue dress, clutching a gold trophy. TV interview clip, I believe translation isn't just about language. It's about power, who gets heard, and who stays invisible. Then, as if the projector simply shut off, the light turned cold. She was summoned to an emergency faculty meeting. She entered a dark wood-paneled boardroom facing 8 silent faces, no smiles, no greetings. On the table lay a binder stamped in red Academic Ethics Review. A gray-haired man, her department head, spoke Dr. Clay. There have been concerns regarding your latest publication. Allegations of plagiarism have been made. Mariah's eyes widened. Plagiarism? That's absurd. All my sources are cited, cross-referenced. A woman cut in, velvet voice with an edge. We understand, but as a precaution, the board has decided to suspend you, pending a full investigation. She looked around. Each colleague avoided her gaze, people who once applauded her lectures or called her brilliant, now silent, as if she were a stranger. One whispered enough for her to hear, perhaps she wasn't as brilliant as we thought, or perhaps she simply didn't know her place. Mariah stood still, expression unreadable, but inside, everything shattered. The investigation yielded no concrete evidence, but nobody defended her. In that pale academic world, a successful black woman was a fragile anomaly. Weeks later, a quiet email arrived. Dr. Mariah Clay's appointment at Rainford has been terminated, effective immediately. No press release, no public vindication. Just her name erased with a single stroke. Back to now, Amara opened her eyes. Her hand hovered over the well-worn dictionary. The name Mariah Clay on the first page was half smudged as if her own memory tried to erase it. She remembered being forced to move out, sever ties, change her name and identity. She chose Amara from her mother's Yoruba notebook meaning grace, not forgiveness for others, but survival for herself. For 20 years, she became a ghost. A maid, an apron, a quiet, yes, sir. But tonight, she didn't see the dossier on the table as a chore, she saw it as the power that was stolen, now returned. She needed a name again not to hide, but to bury the version of herself that the system had buried first. On the old laptop, she opened a blank Word document. The first line she typed was her real name, Dr. Mariah Clay. She positioned the cursor on the next line. It blinked 3 times. She opened her mother's notebook Yoruba names as ancestral prophecy. Line 28. Amara, grace, not given, not borrowed, survived. She typed it Amara, then hesitated, then added the silent middle name Belle, the name her mother once used affectionately. Amara Belle, a name nobody remembered but strong enough to live again. 3 months later, she sat in the Carrington Estate HR office. Her resume read high school diploma. 5 years of cleaning experience, no degree, no references, no notable work history. The interviewer said nothing else. She black, middle-aged, unassuming, was hired on the spot in under 10 minutes. Dr. Mariah Clay disappeared from paperwork. Amara Belle officially became the invisible hourly worker. Those first years she slept in the basement by the laundry room, woke at 5 a.m. to make coffee for her boss, prepare breakfast for Mrs. Carrington, the arthritic wife living in a mansion 40 times larger than her old apartment. Then 2 children were born, Emma and Julian. She held them before they could crawl, sing Yoruba lullabies when their mother was exhausted or away. They called her Mama Belle before they knew Mommy. She taught Emma counting with songs, showed Julian how to keep calm when his father grew angry. She smiled through mopping floors, hugged them during thunderstorms, labored through nights when they were feverish. They grew, and she became invisible. Emma began referring to her as her when speaking to friends. She'll get it. Julian stopped hugging her, replaced it with a cold nod when she served breakfast. One day, Emma told her boyfriend she's not really staff, more like long-term domestic support. As if she were a smart appliance, emotional, but never meant to be heard. That evening, Amara stood in the downstairs bathroom. A dim, fluorescent bulb cast her unshowered, unmade face, dark skin, eyes deep and composed, no anger, just stillness. She stared at her reflection and wondered if a tree falls in the forest, and no one hears it. Did I ever exist as Dr. Mariah Clay? The laptop's glow reflected on her face like a dead moon, silently illuminating something vital. She was translating. Her orange highlighter paused on open kernel access. She tilted her head, not because she didn't understand, but because it didn't belong there. Next line, reverse AI key licensing upon third-party integration. Her hand left the mouse. She exhaled, not fatigue, but as if confronting a scar, how technical language can conceal seizure of control. She began reading again, this time illuminating hidden layers. As she read, she realized the contract wasn't just a business document, it was a maze. A gate left ajar, and the company would hand over the keys to the one person they least expected. Her eyes changed. No longer the worker's calm gaze, but the gaze of someone who once lectured on structural linguistics. Someone trained to expose power built on words. She sat up straight, her hand squeezing the mouse before racing to open another tab with a document from her personal drive, a paper she wrote over 20 years ago. The weaponization of language in cross-border tech agreements. Beneath the table, her phone buzzed a spam text. She deleted it. Then porch wind slipped in through a window crack, cold, clean, like a warning. She understood this wasn't just about dangerous terms. It was a breach one that could sink Carrington's systems if exposed. And the only person seeing it was someone they thought lacked the credentials to decode a single line. Amara picked up the vintage phone next to her tea. She opened contacts. Omar Wells under Do Not Delete an Old Friend, code language researcher and the only person who defended her when Rainford turned its back. Her finger tapped Need You, urgent. She sent the message. The screen dimmed. She sat quietly for a moment. Wind stirred again. Affirmation tonight wasn't about translation. It was about confrontation. She looked back at the screen. Her eyes glowed, not from the light, but because a part of her had woken, a part that had slept under the maid's apron for 20 years. She lifted her pen and scribbled beside open kernel access, potential breach point embedded takeover logic. A gentle smile curved her lips, not triumphant, but one of recognition she'd never disappeared. She had just been waiting for the right moment to speak. She tapped the desk softly like a conductor signaling the start of her encore. They gave me a puzzle. I'll give them a revolution. The small coffee shop sat tucked away behind the southern subway station, no neon logo, no flashy sign, just a dark wooden door and a frosted window with white chalk lettering. Hot coffee, no personal questions. Amara stepped inside, wrapped in a charcoal coat and scarf, hair tied neatly in a bun, purse pressed close. To any passerby, she looked like a middle-aged woman sneaking in between overnight shifts. The place was nearly deserted. In the dim yellow light of a corner table by the gray brick wall sat a man, sharp-jawed, round glasses, eyes cool and focused. Omar Wells. Amara stopped at the table. He looked up, and in that single moment, time rewinded 20 years. Back then, they co-authored a paper on semantic algorithms and translation. He was the only one who stood by her when everyone else turned their backs after the plagiarism allegations. He waited outside the board meeting, punching the wall and hissing. They're not removing you because you're wrong. They're removing you because you're right and black. Now, he studied her for a long moment, then nodded. No hug, no small talk. Simply, you still write in all caps in subject lines. You still drink black coffee, she replied. They shared a gentle, familiar laugh, comforting, like something warm left behind. Amara pulled out a thick, wool-folded copy of the contract edges worn and creased and placed it before him. I translated it last night. I need your eyes on Section 5. Omar didn't ask anything more. He put on earphones, opened his laptop, and began reading. His eyes scanned it like malware detection software trained to catch danger. 5 minutes passed in complete silence. At clause 5.23, he paused, frowning, tapping the table rhythmically, the old habit of alerting to trouble. He pulled the hard copy close, circled a paragraph in red, flipped to page 12. Finally, he looked up, his gaze taut as a nearly broken string. This isn't just a bad deal. This is digital treason. Her eyes didn't blink, but her heart clenched not in surprise, but with confirmation of her fears. Omar leaned in, voice low and steady. Clause 5.2.3, open kernel access for collaborative firmware inspection, sounds harmless, but in code terms, it means once signed, they gain unrestricted entry into Carrington's AI core. It's a back door. He opened his laptop, cross-referencing Carrington's internal codebase from past security work, typed a few commands to trace function calls. If they activate this clause, Carrington's AI infrastructure becomes transparent, editable, vulnerable. They can rewrite how the system learns, reacts, thinks. Amara nodded slowly. Reverse AI key licensing, she repeated. That doesn't mean just shared rights, it means control drift. Carrington signs away its crown jewels. Omar studied her. His look mixed fear and amazement not at her analysis, but at the woman before him, still sharper than when they lectured together. "You realized all this last night?" "Yes," she replied. "Language is always the first place people hide their crimes." The cafe emptied further as rain started, pinprick droplets pattering on the corrugated tin roof. Amara sat quietly, spinning a black pen between her fingers, winding it like the strings of an old instrument preparing to play again. On the laptop screen lay her clean, complete translation over 30 pages, each clause annotated meticulously. Ambiguous clause grants unilateral data access. Licensing structure deceptive. Masks full IP transfer. At the end of the document, she wrote simply, "This document, if signed, will authorize an irreversible surrender of Carrington Systems' AI infrastructure and intellectual property. This is not collaboration. It is a quiet invasion." She saved 2 versions, one encrypted on USB, one on a personal cloud under the name Mary C., a name scrubbed from official records long ago. Omar looked across the table, reading the resolve on her face, the resolve to send a signal they'd probably dismiss or worse, try to bury immediately. "You're going to send this to Reginald?" "Yes." "Amara, they won't believe you." She met his gaze, steady. "I know." Omar sighed, not bitterly, just sadly. "They won't believe you until they bleed." She allowed herself a slight nod, no words needed. She already carried that resolve deeply. "Then I'll make them see the blood before it spills." She didn't email it. She chose Reginald's preferred method, the same strategy he used to humiliate her publicly, a printed envelope, hand-delivered during a meeting. She stood, placed the original document and her annotated copy into a large envelope, sealed it, and addressed it plainly. For Carrington, urgent. Not through corporate channels, but via a private courier Omar arranged with instructions deliver it by hand. No one else. "We need backups," Omar said. They plugged in a second USB, the original contract, her translation, her notes, and Omar's AI system analysis, encrypted with triple-layered keys. Omar uploaded a copy to his secure organization server, the same team that investigates cybercrime and data laundering. "Now," he said, "even if they try to erase every trace, the truth is packaged and ready, enough to blow this wide open." Amara nodded silent affirmation. She was preparing for battle not with weapons or shouting, but with a dossier, a translation, and an undeniable truth. The clock read 3:17 a.m. In the old kitchen, yellow light fell on a wooden table choked with paperwork, final translated pages, red ink notes, AI architecture diagrams, technical terms circled like landmines. Amara dozed there, chin resting on her arm, pen clutched in her hand as if her brain wouldn't stop working even in sleep. Her coat hung loosely off her shoulders, next to the laptop glowing dimly with the final document title. Carrington Sinotech Deal, Strategic Risk Advisory Notes, Confidential. On the table, amidst the papers, lay an old photograph pinned behind the Chinese dictionary, edges yellowed. A breeze crept in, rustling the image to the floor tile. She stirred awake, eyes unfocused, yet earnest. She picked it up. It was her mother, Ifeoma Clay, a black woman with razor-sharp eyes and an unflinching gaze. Her hair was pulled tight, blouse buttoned high, staring straight into the camera as though she could see beyond the present, into untold futures. Below, in faded ink, "Don't bow to noise disguised as authority." Amara placed the photograph gently back on the table, smoothing the corner. A small, private moment like receiving power from something beyond herself. She stood, approaching a small mirror mounted on the cupboard, a place she used to check her uniform before work. But tonight, no uniform hung there. The reflection stared back a face lined but resolute, lips dry, and eyes clear and piercing like a storm's calm before impact. She looked at herself long and said softly words addressed to both the mirror and her hidden past. You used to be a professor. Tomorrow, teach them what silence can do. 5:12 a.m. She packed the dossier, closed the laptop, slid a copy into her inside jacket pocket, choosing not to rely on any system, digital or otherwise. One final glance at the old kitchen, once a refuge of pain and patience. Now, it was her war room. She opened the door and stepped into the corridor. A chilly draft swept in from the glass end of the hallway. The early morning scent of Carrington Estate wet wood, cold stone, and leftover dinner lingering still felt familiar, but no longer threatening. Morning light filtered through tall windows. The night was over, and with it, Amara Belle the housekeeper was no longer what she seemed. She tugged her strap tighter. Today, she walked into the board meeting not to fill glasses, but to unmask what they refused to acknowledge. The white glare from the overhead lights bounced off the mahogany table, casting each figure in the boardroom into long silhouettes like shadows of power cold, still, and self-assured. The boardroom of Carrington Systems was where billion-dollar decisions were made, where every word passed through a lawyer's mouth, and every chair cost more than the lowest employee's annual salary. This morning, every seat was taken. 12 people, all in tailored suits and perfect ties, laptops aglow, eyes weary but alive with anticipation. Today was the day they would sign the global contract, the dawn of a new era for Carrington. Reginald Carrington sat at the head of the table, back straight, gaze regal like a monarch about to seal his empire's fate. He flipped through the English version of the contract, hastily translated by the legal team, though none in the room could confidently say what the original Chinese text truly contained. "Gentlemen, let's make history," he smiled, stretching his shoulders. "This is how empires begin." Then the door at the far end of the room opened. Footsteps entered soft, deliberate like a discordant note in an otherwise triumphant symphony. All eyes turned and froze. Amara Belle stepped in, still in her charcoal gray housekeeping uniform, buttoned white shirt, no jewelry, no makeup, just a black woman holding a thick manila folder. She walked slow, steady toward the head of the table. Each step echoed on the marble floor, and every gaze followed, not out of expectation, but confusion. Reginald half rose. His voice tightened, trying to sound authoritative, but cracking under the strain. "Amara, this is a boardroom, not a laundry room." She didn't stop, didn't speak, just reached the center of the table, looked Reginald square in the eye, and gently placed the folder down. She turned the file, aligning the name toward him. Her voice rose, not loud, not meek, but final as a period at the end of a sentence. "Here's the translation you requested. The highlighted parts are the reasons you'll lose the company if you sign it." Silence, like the air had been vacuumed from the room. The board members glanced at one another. A man on the right side scoffed a solitary laugh, sharp and defensive, like a reflex against something incomprehensible. "You've got to be kidding me." But no one joined in. The laugh fell flat, smothered by the silence like a stone sinking into a well. Reginald said nothing. He stared at the folder like it was a grenade with the pin barely hanging. He glanced at Amara, but this time, his gaze didn't command. It calculated. Amara gave a small nod, turned, and walked out. No explanation. No plea. The moment her hand left the folder, something in that room cracked, though no one dared to admit it yet. The file lay on the table like an alien object. Everyone stared as if it had descended from another realm. Reginald glanced around the room, then picked it up. His fingers slid along the cardstock a faint rasp. No one moved. He opened the first page. A short laugh escaped him. Dismissive. Oh, come on, she used orange highlights. A few followed with polite chuckles. He read the opening line, the introduction. Then the technical clause section. Page 2. His expression began to shift. His jaw clenched. The glass of water to his left remained untouched, though he always drank while reviewing documents. Page 3. He stopped. Reread. His eyes squinted as if the light had suddenly grown harsh, but it wasn't the light. It was the clarity of what he read. His fingers turned pages faster now, no longer calm but frantic, desperate. The pages thickened under his trembling hands. Sweat started to purl at his temples. A board member on the left blurted out, "Wait, this clause voids our patent rights if disputed." Heads turned. The speaker flinched at the loudness of his own voice in a room that knew only the sound of keyboards and sarcasm dressed in education. Another voice, low, uncertain, murmured like a confession. Our lawyers missed this. The question hung in the air. No one dared answer. The mood in the room shifted from smug to stunned, to slowly, unmistakably, afraid. Faces, once symbols of control, now cast shadows born of blindness. Reginald gritted his teeth, but said nothing. He flipped back to page 6. A red-marked section read, "Hidden access path grants autonomous system override post-integration." As CEO, he knew exactly what that meant. This wasn't a partnership. It was a handover of control. His leg trembled under the table. He set the file down as if it burned. Breathless silence spread. Then Amara's voice rose again, not loud, not sharp, but clear as a bell at dawn. They didn't miss it. They didn't know where to look. She was standing near the door. No one had seen her return, no footsteps, no knock. Just the presence of someone they thought had said all she needed to say. Reginald turned. For the first time, his gaze held no sarcasm, no shield of authority. Only the look of a man realizing the joke he built had become his own verdict. No one moved. The boardroom, once humming with power, now chilled like stone. Amara's words still echoing. They didn't miss it. They didn't know where to look. A salt-and-pepper-haired director, glasses slipping down his nose, broke the tension with a cracked voice. How could you know all this?" Amara turned. She walked back toward the table, soft-soled shoes making no sound, yet each step hammering like a drumbeat on conscience. She didn't bow. Didn't ask. Didn't seek permission. She stood tall, the stance of someone who had survived humiliation, silence, and years of being unseen. Her voice, low but unshakable. "Because my name isn't just Amara Belle. I was once Dr. Mariah Clay, tenured linguist and technical translator at Rainford Institute." The words fell like a drawn sword, no blood, but cutting through illusion. Reginald Carrington, the man who had laughed the loudest when handing her the draft, froze as if slapped. His eyes widened. His throat dried. He stepped back half an inch, reaching instinctively for the leather chair behind him. You're that woman." Not because he forgot her name, but because he couldn't believe that name could be here in his boardroom, in a housekeeper's uniform. Amara dipped her head, not her spine. Just a nod, the polite knock before breaking down a wall of lies. "Yes, the woman you laughed at, just saved your billion-dollar dream." No rage, no gloating, just truth, and truth unsettles those who thrive in falsehoods. A young female executive at the edge of the room gasped, as if witnessing the rise of a buried legend. Another exhaled. My God. No one else spoke. Amara stood for one final breath. Her eyes swept the room over every face that once laughed as she carried glasses, sneered as she walked past the projector that powered their global strategies. She didn't say thank you, didn't apologize, didn't explain. She turned and walked away. Empty hands, upright shoulders. Her shoes made no sound, but the silence left behind rang like the bell toll of a fallen empire. The boardroom door closed behind her with a soft click, soft but heavy as a verdict. Morning light poured through the small kitchen window, casting a warm, misplaced glow across the worn wooden table. The kitchen sat still. As usual, copper pots hung neatly, a dish towel folded with precision, the teapot recently cooled. Amara sat there, still in the same uniform from the day before. Her back was straight, fingers wrapped around a white porcelain mug with a chipped rim. In front of her, a closed laptop screen, but her eyes stared through it, as if reading the words no one ever dared to write. The kitchen door opened gently. No one ever came into this space at this hour except her. But today, footsteps echoed slow, hesitant across the tiled floor. Reginald Carrington. He held 2 cups of coffee. One, black ceramic for himself, the other, white porcelain, resting on a napkin-colored saucer. The steam rose warm, yet oddly out of place. He stood there in a white shirt, no tie, his silvering hair slightly unkempt, no blazer, no authority. Amara, he began, then stopped. No, Dr. Clay, I owe you more than thanks. Amara didn't turn around. Her voice was calm, but each word sounded forged from cold steel. Is this an apology for last night, or for the last 20 years? Silence. Only the ticking of the clock and the soft swirl of coffee steam stretching into the stillness. Reginald drew in a slow breath. His mouth opened, then closed. There were no words in his vocabulary prepared for that question. Amara turned slightly, not enough to face him, just a tilt of her head. Her gaze rested on the wall, as if recalling fragments of time he never cared to remember. Your wife called me sister, when she was too weak to lift a spoon. Your children called me Belle, back when they were too young to know what status meant, but you called me that maid, even when I was the one holding your house and your family together. Reginald's hand tightened around the handle. Coffee spilled slightly at the rim. He stepped forward, set the cup down, then, from his shirt pocket, he pulled out an envelope. Without a word, he placed it in front of Amara. She glanced at it. A plain white envelope, no name. Inside, a personal check. Amount 500, the recordant is here signed, Reginald J. Carrington. A man like him didn't write personal checks, but today, he had. Not because he believed money could fix everything, but because, for the first time in his life, he was admitting he owed something to a woman he once made invisible. Amara set her mug down, gently pushed the envelope back toward him. Her eyes held no anger, but no forgiveness either. Just a look, the kind of look men like Reginald spend a lifetime learning to understand. The $500,000 check sat motionless on the table. Amara gave it one more glance, then pushed it back toward him again, without a sound. No, I don't need that kind of money. Reginald flinched, not at the rejection, but at how clean it was. No moral high ground, no speech, just clarity. He started to pull his hand away, but Amara held the envelope in place midair, her voice low and solid. But I will take it, if you agree to 3 conditions. The air in the kitchen thickened like morning fog. Reginald straightened, his eyes widening as if he was finally learning what pride costs. Amara didn't wait for him to nod. She began, each point cutting through the veil of politeness like a blade. 1. My real identity stays hidden. No press releases, no Maid-turned-hero headlines, no PR parade. I don't need applause. I need protection. Only those who need to know will know. You'll refer to me as Amara Belle and nothing more. Reginald nodded slowly, like swallowing bitter medicine. Amara continued, her pace unwavering. 2. I return not as staff, not as a symbol, but as an independent advisor. I want full authority to review and challenge all international contracts, especially those with AI or multilingual terms. No approvals needed. No legal filters. You don't hire me to decorate your due diligence. You bring me in to fix what your people keep missing. Reginald opened his mouth, almost to object, but he couldn't. She had seen what his entire system had overlooked, or worse, ignored. Amara locked eyes with him, then delivered the third slowly, deliberately. 3, and this is non-negotiable. You make a public declaration of a zero racism policy, not an email blast, not a quiet memo, a formal statement, on record, with you at the podium, and you say clearly that, from this day forward, Carrington Systems will not tolerate racial bias, overt or subtle. You say it, not your HR head, not a spokesperson, you. Reginald swallowed hard. He looked away briefly, as if sunlight had pierced a place long shrouded in silence. Then he turned back. His eyes didn't evade any more. Done, he said, quiet, but certain. All of it. No applause, no signature yet, but something had been signed, an invisible contract, the kind you don't break without losing yourself. Amara nodded. For the first time, she reached for the check and slipped it into her jacket. Not as a reward, but as a moral down payment. 31st floor, once reserved only for the irreplaceables. The hallway was silent, carpeted in soft metallic gray. Glass plaques lined the walls, executive names, financial achievements, revenue graphs that once made Reginald beam with pride. The glass door opened without a sound. Amara's new office sat at the far end, left side, larger than the basement where she'd worked for 20 years. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the skyline like a living portrait. Inside, a walnut desk, high-back leather chair, a bookshelf still bare, a new file cabinet with no labels. On the desk, a modern laptop, a fountain pen in a box, and nothing else. No nameplate. No flowers. No outstretched hands. Amara stood at the threshold. She wasn't surprised, not disappointed. She simply nodded, as if confirming to herself this was the right place. It just didn't need a welcome. She stepped inside. Her soft heels tapped the floor like a rhythm this room had never heard. Without a word, she placed her bag on the side chair, unzipped it, and pulled out a canvas-wrapped object. She unwrapped it. A wooden plaque, hand-carved, letters slightly scorched by time. Amara Belle, strategic translator, dangerously fluent. No fluff, no towering title, no director, no senior, no global executive. Just 3 lines. But each word struck a blow at the prejudice that had lasted 20 years. She placed the plaque on her desk, facing the door. Then sat down, opened her laptop. Her fingers glided over the keyboard, starting her first internal memo. Recommendations for revising international contracts. No one in the adjacent office knew the woman who just walked in didn't need a seat to claim her place, didn't need applause to prove her worth. She had lived like a shadow, and now that silence had become her power. A smile played faintly at her lips, not joy, not vengeance, just the expression of someone who had placed herself exactly where the world never expected her to be. She looked around. White walls, glass doors, the same upper floor she used to scrub by hand. Now, she wasn't holding a mop. She was holding authority. They still think I'm just a maid. That's fine. I don't need a title. I have evidence. 33rd floor, after hours. The entire lighting system had switched to energy-saving mode, but the East Auxiliary Boardroom, typically reserved for internal strategic meetings, remained fully lit. Halogen lights beamed down on the glossy black conference table, where 5 men sat like gray pieces on a chessboard no one dared to speak above. No assistant, no minute taker, no coffee, no water, only silent consensus. At the head sat Bradley Langston, the seasoned CFO, evenly graying hair, steel-rimmed glasses, infamous for his ability to make risk disappear from documents faster than any department in the company. His finger tapped lightly on a thin file, not looking at anyone, yet each tap seemed to strike a nerve in the room. "Let's not pretend we're here for anything else," Bradley said evenly. "We all saw what happened last week, and if we just sit here, it's going to get worse." To his left, Marcus Graves, VP of Operations, shrugged. "She saved the company. I'll give her that." Bradley glanced at him, offered a cold smile. "So, what? So did the janitor who pulled the fire alarm in '09. Did we give him a seat at the table?" No one laughed. A man near the door spoke, low but sharp. "It's not just the title, it's what she represents." Another nodded. "A black woman, from the maid's quarters, now 3 floors below the board." Bradley concluded, "Exactly. She's a symbol, and symbols are dangerous when they're not hand-picked." The air was thick with entitlement. No one said it was about race, but every glance confirmed it. Words weren't necessary. History was. Bradley pulled out a slimmer folder stamped Draft. Confidential. Sentinel. AI hardware deal. Projected at $100 million. We adjust the appendix. Just slightly. A clause about multi-layer component rights. She'll review it. She'll miss it. And when it's uncovered, we've got grounds to clear her out. Marcus tilted his head. "You're suggesting we plant a bomb under her seat?" Bradley smirked. "No, I'm suggesting we put a banana peel under her heel. Whether she slips is up to her." A wave of silent nods passed around the table. No objections. No one asked about consequences. Only one question. "When?" Bradley replied. "Edits by Friday. Sent to her team by Monday. Signature expected by end of quarter. Plenty of time for her to look competent, until she isn't." No mention of ethics, no gratitude, only strategy and resentment toward a woman they used to order to fetch their coffee. The boardroom door closed behind them. No recording. No trace. But a trap had been set. And the woman who once scrubbed the floors beneath their shoes was now the quiet target of the most silent hunt Carrington Systems had ever staged. 31st floor. Amara's office remained quiet, but something in the air had shifted. In recent weeks, the glances from certain co-workers through the frosted glass had turned coldly curious, no longer respectful, no longer kind, and more troubling key documents were arriving late, incomplete, or quietly. Tuesday morning. A project assistant dropped a folder on her desk marked, "Final draft, legal reviewed, internal circulation only." The Contract Sentinel. A $100 million joint venture between Carrington Systems and an international hardware firm specializing in enterprise-grade AI. Amara opened the file. Everything seemed correct. Internal stamps, digital legal signatures, a familiar layout. Until page 17. Her eyes paused. A phrase she hadn't seen in the version she had drafted the previous week. Data Elasticity Clause, Section 4.6. She tilted her head. Not a common term, not in hardware, and certainly not standard in access authorization contexts. She read on. In the event of AI kernel optimization protocols requiring cross-hardware harmonization, all in-system data may be temporarily duplicated for third-party analysis, provided said party maintains NDA-level security compliance. Innocuous at first glance. A string of jargon dense enough to make any lawyer nod along. But Amara, a master of semantics, saw the real meaning the clause granted the partner full rights to clone internal AI data for analysis outside the system. She marked it in red. A cut, subtle, but deep, like a paper wound not bleeding immediately, but enough to infect a system from the inside. Just then, an email arrived from her data analytics team, Malik and Jordan, her two most trusted junior analysts. Hey, Amara, they said this version had slight changes. They asked to send it directly to you since you're the final reviewer. We haven't had time to check. She frowned. Who were they? And why were changes made without informing the full team? Later that afternoon, as Amara walked past the 30th floor lounge, she overheard a low comment not whispered, but quiet enough to suggest intention. She wouldn't be here without Reginald's guilt trip, just another figurehead, playing professor in a cleaner's uniform. She didn't turn, but her chest tightened. Not at the words, but because it had started. The fragile trust of the last few weeks was cracking like paint being peeled off by hands she couldn't yet identify. Back in her office, she stared again at the clause. Her finger tapped the phrase slowly. 3 beats, then still. This isn't a slip. This was planted, and someone expects me to miss it. She sat up straight. Her eyes turned to the skyline outside the glass wall. Floor 31 was still. But the game wasn't. Night fell. Floor 31 emptied, but her light stayed on. Amara sat before the screen, the Sentinel contract open, sections highlighted in yellow, red, green, a multi-layered battlefield. She leaned in again, scanning line by line. Her eyes reached the bottom where the temporary legal signature should have been. It wasn't there. Just a flat PDF tag, no encryption, no timestamp. She opened file info, and for the first time that night, her heart skipped half a beat. The metadata didn't match. File created 4 days ago, last modified just 11 hours ago. No official changelog in the internal management system. She sat upright. Someone replaced the original. No noise, no email, no Slack message, no system alert. She accessed the company's internal version tracker filtered by timestamp, project name, and hidden suffix tags. 5 versions appeared. Only one didn't match the system hash of the others. She selected it, opened the side menu, clicked Access History. A list of IP addresses popped up long, but familiar. She used to oversee this infrastructure before her demotion at the Institute. And there it was. A single line. Accessed and modified, 04 to 13 a.m., terminal CFO-BL. CFO-BL, Bradley Langston's terminal. Her eyes didn't blink. Not from surprise, from confirmation. The man who'd nodded along to her translation just weeks ago had laid the snare. She stood, pulled a double encrypted external drive from her drawer, one that opened only with her personal code and fingerprint. She downloaded everything. Original version. Modified version. Metadata logs. Screenshot of the IP trail. 9 files in total. She placed them in a folder titled Sweep Log V1. Then sent a brief encrypted message to Omar. Found breach source. Need mirror backup tonight. We'll explain later. Sent. No, okay. No emoji. Just trust. She printed each document, slipped them into a thick envelope, sealed it, and labeled it by hand. Original evidence, not to be edited. She locked it in the drawer below her desk, the same space where she once stored a mop as the night janitor. It was nearly 2 a.m. She sat back down, gently rubbing the callus on her index finger, the scar of years spent scrubbing floors, folding rags, and silently passing by meetings she wasn't allowed to enter. The light overhead gleamed into her eyes. This time, she didn't flinch. They wanted a maid who'd mop quietly. They forgot I also sweep lies. The executive boardroom at Carrington Systems had never been this quiet. Every senior leader was in place. The long wooden table gleamed. The projector was lit and ready. A copy of the $100 million Sentinel contract sat neatly before each person, a pen laid beside it like part of some ceremonial conclusion. Reginald Carrington sat at the head of the table and gave a small nod, signaling the legal team to begin their final presentation. Everything was perfectly arranged. Until Amara Belle walked in. No uniform, no blazer, just a cream-colored blouse, a worn personal laptop in one hand, and a small USB drive in the other. No one had been informed of her presence, but no one dared ask her to leave. Amara walked to the side table near the projector. She plugged in the USB. No permission. No introduction. Not a single word. The screen lit up with a title. Sentinel Contract Review Internal Only. Everyone turned toward Reginald. He didn't speak, just nodded lightly. Amara advanced to the next slide. Still silent. A comparison chart appeared. The left column showed the original Sentinel contract. The right displayed the recently modified version. Red highlights made the changes unmistakable. At the bottom, timestamps indicating the contract had been quietly edited days ago at dawn. The next slide loaded. Access history, names, timestamps, devices. At the bottom. Last editor Bradley Langston, Chief Financial Officer. A wave of tension surged across the room like cold wind hitting glass. Some exhaled sharply. Backs once upright sank slightly into chairs. Amara remained silent. She didn't need to speak. The facts were speaking loud enough. Then came the final slide, a screenshot of an internal email between Bradley and two subordinates. The text was short but clear. We just need her to miss one thing. Bury the clause deep enough. She won't notice. Once she signs, legal will handle the rest. The room fell deathly silent. No one reached for their water. No one touched their pen. Bradley adjusted in his seat, smirked faintly, trying to stay composed. Anyone can fabricate screenshots. You know how good editing tools are these days. Amara said nothing. She simply clicked play on an audio file from her laptop. A voice came through unmistakably clear. She's too clean. We just need one slip. We don't have to bring her down. Just dirty the floor she's standing on. Bradley's voice. Undeniable. No one said a word. Only the soft hum of the projector could be heard as if it, too, was listening. All eyes turned to Bradley, pale, silent. Amara still didn't say a word. She closed the screen, shut her laptop. She didn't need to win by speaking. She won with what they never thought she could wield the truth. After the recording ended, the room sank into a silence not of reverence but of reckoning. The kind of silence that follows a storm, leaving everything exposed, broken, and far beyond repair. Reginald Carrington stood slowly, his chair pushed back with a dry creak. He looked straight at Bradley Langston, the man who had been his financial right hand for over a decade, the man he once thought irreplaceable. His voice was low, but each word cut with bare-edged clarity for the first time, stripped of diplomacy. You tried to ruin her career, and almost destroyed ours again. Bradley didn't avert his gaze. He leaned back, arms crossed, exhaling like this was just another episode of moral theater. Then he muttered, not loud, but loud enough. "She's just a maid." The room froze again. But this time, not in shock. This time, in recognition. Reginald took a step forward, eyes burning not with rage, but with shame. Not just for Amara, but for himself, for once believing the same thing. She's the reason this company still exists. She saw what none of us saw. She protected what we were about to give away. And you tried to bury her under your own lies. His voice cracked, then hardened like a gavel in a courtroom he didn't know he presided over. "You're fired, Bradley, effective immediately." A long pause. No applause, no nods, no objections. Bradley sat still for a few seconds, then stood, gathered his documents, face unreadable but his back slightly bent. He walked out in silence, through the same door he once entered like he was untouchable. The door clicked shut behind him. A small sound, but it marked the end of an era. Silence remained. Reginald sat down, not leaning back, his hands on the table, back bowed not from exhaustion, but from the weight of laying down his pride for the first time in his life. A senior woman near the far end of the table, known for her cold composure, silver hair tied neatly, bowed her head slightly and whispered, as if confessing, "We don't deserve her." No one responded. Not because they disagreed, but because there was nothing left to deny. Every round of applause this company ever gave had gone to the wrong people. And now, all that remained was silence. The same silence Amara had lived with for 20 years. Only this time, the silence had weight, and Amara was the one making it thunder. The boardroom emptied. The curtains remained open, exposing the parking lot below where sleek cars waited for their owners, each having just weathered a storm of a meeting. Amara stood by the glass, her hand resting gently on the edge of the table. Her eyes traced every motion below a guard directing traffic, an intern sprinting to the security booth, a sparrow landing lightly on the hood of a glossy black SUV. This floor was high, not because of titles but because the wind was colder and the loneliness sharper. Behind her, the door opened softly. No knock, no hurried footsteps. Just Reginald Carrington without his blazer, sleeves rolled up, no longer wearing the face of a CEO, but of a man who had removed his mask of power. He said nothing. He simply stepped beside her just an arm's length away and extended his hand. Bare, quiet, no gesture of comfort, no need for words. Just a hand offered like a vow. Amara turned. Her eyes didn't widen. She just looked, weighing not the sincerity, but the weight of change. No words were exchanged. The breeze from the hallway rustled both of their shirts. A moment passed. Then she raised her hand and took his. No squeeze, no shake. Just a grip between two people who survived not a war, but a system built to make sure one of them never did. Between them, there was no apology. No thank you. No, I respect you. No, I see you now. Because everything that needed to be said had been said in silence. Reginald let go first, nodded once, walked away, no glance back, no plea for forgiveness. Amara remained. Her eyes returned to the parking lot, now half empty. A delivery truck reversed slowly, its tires swirling puddles left behind from the rain the night before. The sky looked clearer. She closed her eyes for just a second. And when they opened again, The world was sharper not because her vision had improved, but because the final veil had been torn away. Her inner voice spoke, calm, not triumphant, just true. I didn't win. They just ran out of ways to lose against me. A year had passed. Carrington Systems was no longer a dusty replica of a leadership model built for white men in navy suits and frozen smiles. The new headquarters in Midtown had been redesigned, no longer separating indispensable from everyone else. No red carpet for executives, no private elevators for the help. Now, everyone walked the same hallways, shared the same elevators, breathed in the same morning light from the grand glass dome above. Amara Belle, now formerly Dr. Mariah Clay, walked the corridor slowly, but steadily. She wore an ash-gray linen dress, hair pinned up, a folder in one hand and a small wooden box in the other. Everyone she passed, from interns to mid-level directors, met her eyes. No averting, no curiosity, just the look of people who knew this woman had changed the architecture of the place they worked and lived in. One nodded. Another smiled. Not because they'd been trained to, but because now, ignorance was no longer acceptable. The corner office on the 20th floor, once reserved for foreign consultants, now bore a new nameplate. Dr. M. Clay, Global Relations and Equity Division. The lettering was elegant, printed on brushed steel, proper, earned, rightfully placed. Amara paused at the door. Her hand rested on the plaque. Her eyes lingered on the name. Dr. M. Clay, a name that had once been deleted from systems, replaced by uniforms and floor rags, now mounted on a door official, dignified, untouchable. But she took it down. Inside the wooden box was another nameplate unpolished, no gold trim. Hand-carved by her, not outsourced. Each letter burned dark by heat, slightly uneven but unmistakably hers. Amara Belle, still dangerous, still silent. She hung it in place of the official one, not to reject her credentials, but to reclaim what had kept her alive all this time, the weight of silence and the danger of being underestimated. She opened the door and stepped inside her new office. No leather chair, no giant artwork, just sunlight pouring in through large windows, and a towering bookshelf filled with drafts, technical reports, international language policies, and the same old dictionary she'd once taught with. She placed her folder on the desk, sat down, opened her laptop. The screen booted slowly. But when the header line finally appeared, the world seemed to realign itself. Policy Notes Equity Through Language, Draft 1. She smiled. Not much, not posed, just a thin, honest line. The voice inside her returned not like a speech, but a sharpened truth. They named me a maid, because they couldn't spell my title. They feared my silence, because it didn't ask for permission. Now I sit here, same woman, no pedestal, just presence. A year isn't long in corporate history, but at Carrington Systems, the last year had done more than the previous 2 decades combined. Since Amara Belle, or rather, Dr. Mariah Clay, took leadership of the Global Relations and Equity Division, space was no longer measured in square footage, but in what had once been ignored. Change hadn't begun with oversized slogans. It began with small print in hiring policies. Applicants will not be evaluated based on accent, name, background, or alma mater. It began with rewriting complaint forms, removing the line, "Are you sure this isn't a misunderstanding?" It began with a woman once dismissed as the kind maid, now standing before the executive board, teaching concepts like invisible authority and systemic bias. Each quarter, Amara led a mandatory micro-session not in the tone of a lecturer, but through stories. She spoke about language, how prejudice hides in phrases like "she's not a cultural fit," or how leadership potential often gets defined by mimicry, never by origin. The leadership team listened, no longer checking their watches. Because now, they were no longer allowed to walk away from the truth. HR rewrote its entire response protocol. Discrimination claims were now addressed within 24 hours, not 24 weeks. Racial jokes, once brushed off as harmless, became grounds for dismissal. And for the first time in Carrington's history, 3 black women sat on the executive board not because of a diversity campaign, but because they had always been qualified. They were finally seen. In June, the entire company was called back to headquarters. The main auditorium was full, on stage. Reginald Carrington stepped up, his hair now grayer, his shoulders heavier not from power, but from learning to carry real accountability. The lights dimmed. The screen behind him displayed in bold, "Zero racism, not a slogan, a structure." Reginald looked toward the audience. Amara sat in row 3, not in the center, no bold makeup, no name badge, just present as always, silent, but impossible to overlook. He began to speak. Not loud, not grandiose, but clear like a bell tolling in a room once deaf to truth. "I was blind." A pause. "And a maid taught me to see." No laughter. No applause. Because this wasn't a moment of glory. It was a moment of unmasking. She didn't stand. She bowed her head just slightly, not to receive, but to close a door no one had dared open for far too long. By day's end. Carrington Systems breathed like a lung after rain, inhaling the last rays of sunset, exhaling the silence of a day with no more power games. Most employees had gone. Elevators no longer chimed. The hallways were blanketed in a quiet like background music. In her corner office on the 20th floor, Amara Belle, still not changing her nameplate, still wearing her morning coat, walked slowly to the small tea station behind her desk. A white porcelain pot, a simple clay mug, a box of green tea wrapped in wood. Everything prepared exactly as she had for herself in that basement kitchen for 20 years back when everyone called her Belle, as if it were the nickname of a kindly housekeeper. She poured the water, unhurried, let the scent of tea settle into the air like a soft greeting to herself. No alerts, no calls, just time. And her. She carried the mug to the window, where the last sunlight spread across glass towers buildings she once only dusted from the outside. Now, she looked out from within. Her hands wrapped the mug, the clay warm, her gaze soft. No need to squint because for the first time, everything was finally within reach. The sky wasn't dramatic, just soft hues brushing the cloud line like colors learning to reconcile. No one stood beside her, no flowers, no standing ovation. Just a cup of tea, steeped right, and a room she had entered on her own 2 feet. Her voice returned low, clear. A truth that needed no permission. I was never just a maid. I was never just a woman. I was always more, they just weren't ready to see it. She took a sip. The sunlight poured through the glass, brushing the steam rising from her cup, forming a streak of light like a thread of belief that had never gone out. She didn't need a celebration. She just needed peace in a room that was finally hers. The door remained open. The sky still bright. And the name Amara Belle, though never printed in history books, was now quietly etched into every policy, every glance, every decision that no longer went unseen. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.